Hello and welcome to another anime lore and theory video. I'm Shergok, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at Shalltear's change in personality, how she became more submissive instead of arrogant and dominant, and how this changes how we can perceive the NPCs and the limits of their agency. But before we're going to take a closer look at any of this, let me quickly thank my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. And with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. Both in the books and in the anime, there's a very subtle character development that Shalltear Bloodfallen undergoes. And everything begins at the start of Volume 3. Because during the carriage ride that ends in a double ambush, one sprung from the bandits of the death-spreading brigade, who thought they were attacking a carriage that could hardly defend itself, and the other from the NPCs of the Great Tomb of Nazareth, who had hoped for this in order to ideally capture some casters. After all, they were the ones that Einzelgun wanted, in order to learn more about the magic system of the New World, so that he can gauge the differences between the magic system of the New World and the one from Yggdrasil Online he is familiar with. But when it came to pure melee fighters, being one was just a death sentence, simply because they were too weak to win a fight and way too insignificant for any of the NPCs to want anything from them. So they had no bargaining power. And Shalltear in particular was only interested in her mission, and perhaps in Solution Epsilon. And even her original goal of capturing casters turned into a pleasure walk for her. Or at least for the vampire bride carrying her. And even the actual task faded into the background rather quickly, and Shalltear was only focused on the confrontation and the imminent battle. However, she did not perceive her opponents as a threat to her, but rather as worthless victims, as was beautifully demonstrated in her fight, and I use the term very generously here, against Brain Anglaus. Her statement that she would only notice a power increase if it were won on a large scale, in meters and not millimeters, broke Brain Anglaus, and made him cry and beg like a child whose sandcastle has just been destroyed. His spirit and his will was shattered under Shalltear's overwhelming power. And the strongest of the Floor Guardians, Shalltear, was also rightfully proud of her power, and very self-centered at that. And she was also created by Pero Roncino, and was therefore a collection of all kinds of special interests and preferences the 18+ enthusiast had. This is why none of his personality traits rubbed off on Shalltear Bloodfallen, and because of this, Shalltear was not only arrogant, but also the opposite of grounded, because Shalltear did not bother to walk to her opponents herself. Instead, she was quite literally carried on the hands of one of her vampire brides, and she herself only fought when it was absolutely necessary, and when it was about playing with the cornered humans. And as mentioned, she only acknowledged Brain Anglaus with boredom. But this absolute self-confidence, coupled with an arrogance that ignored all warnings, and almost led to a fight in the carriage between Sebastian and Shalltear, because Sebas dared to warn Shalltear about the risk associated with the possibility of entering the blood frenzy status and losing control, which Shalltear would then suffer from if she wasn't careful and if too much blood stained her skin. But again, this warning was not only ignored, but more than just dismissed. After all, it couldn't be suffering if you would enjoy this status. Shalltear willingly entered it with a sadistic delight, and gave her vanity and impulses free rein, and played like a kitten with a half-dead mouse. And in all of this indulgence and arrogance, she threw all cautions and tactics to the wind. She neither sent one of her vampire brides ahead to catch and detain anyone who tried to escape, or to find and block a retreat route, nor did the other bride act as a scout or sentry to confront approaching enemies or at least warn Shalltear, if they happened to notice one. And if Shalltear had done either of these two things, she wouldn't have been mind-controlled. Her subsequent reaction to the discovery of an unknown escape route then sharply contrasted with her previously very self-confident and arrogant demeanor, and was marked by an increase in panic and urgency, which shortly thereafter erupted into a battle against Britta's adventurer team. And the fight was in stark contrast to Shalltear's attack on the frightened and desperate members of the death-spreading brigade, where she took all the time in the world to play with her victims, enjoying their fear and the terror that she was spreading. It was more of a hasty swatting, and it would have been nothing more than a footnote in her memory if Britta hadn't thrown the healing potion in her face, which she had received in the tavern from Ein Solgon himself, disguised as Momon the Adventurer. While the minor healing potion harmed Shalltear, as an undead being due to its healing effect, it was way too weak to cause significant damage. However, what it did was cause Shalltear to seriously question her behavior, as instead of simply attacking Britta, Shalltear hypnotized her to make her compliant. Uncharacteristically for Shalltear, she did not do this to have fun with her afterwards, but rather to make her reveal who had given her the potion and why. And when Shalltear learned that Ainz had given her the potion, she was overcome with sheer panic and anxiety, and he thought that she would now be reprimanded by Ein Solgon, since she must somehow crossed his plans unintentionally. In other words, her thoughts were no longer on the battlefield, but already on Ainz, and what awaited her in the Great Tomb, what she possibly could have done wrong, and so on and so forth. And this distraction led to her to send out some minor familiars to eliminate the remaining members of the death-spreading brigade. These summoned servants of Shalltear in turn, partially at least, ran into the Black Scripture and were immediately eliminated. And if Shalltear had not been in her blood frenzy status, and had she not panicked and been distracted so much, the blood-red Valkyrie would have realized that a strong enemy must be nearby, and would probably have set an ambush, or could at the very least have used a message spell or her vampire brides to request support from Sebas and Solution Epsilon, who were still nearby. But since her thoughts were on the internal politics and the situation of the Grey Tomb, and a feared admonishment from Ein Solgon, she was determined to keep any other NPCs out of the matter, and to limit the damage that she had likely caused by eliminating all nearby bandits and the unknown enemy in front of her. And all of her overconfidence and the subsequent frontal attack sealed her mind control. Here too, instead of this, Shalltear could have set an ambush, or for example have sent a decoy, a stand-in, to gauge the power of the enemy, for example ein Harrier, a perfect clone of her, a Doomlord, or at least one of her two vampire brides forward, to again assess the strength of the enemy in front of her. But she didn't do either of these things, and thus got mind-controlled in the end. And the consequences of her misjudgment were, besides the mind control by the Black Scripture and the battle against Ein Solgon, also severe feelings of guilt, which Shalltear then unsuccessfully tried to drown in alcohol at the beginning of Volume 4. Subsequently, in the missions that followed, such as the attack on the capital city of Riestais, Shalltear was relegated to mere guard and courier duties, and not used as the centerpiece of an offensive against the Eight Fingers, which would better match her status as the strongest floor guardians. Shalltear was also aware that because of her failure on the first mission, she was only assigned these menial tasks. Even during the establishment of the Sorcerer Kingdom, she was only given the task of storing goods or transporting them to and from Irantel, with the help of her gate spell. Only during the operation against the Quagoa did Shalltear receive the second chance she had long been waiting for. Clad in full armor and eager for battle, She appeared before Einsolgon to make amends for her mistake and to prove she could control herself and be of use on the battlefield, and be able to follow Einsolgon's orders, despite of the bloodshed she will cause. And thanks to Aura's support, who acted like an older sister, just like Buku Buku Shagama would have to Peruron Shino, she succeeded in doing that. In the abandoned dwarven city, she intercepted Quagoan elite forces and used her mind control in order to extract information from the Quagoa. And even though one of the Quagoa asked if Ainz was Shalltear's subordinate, something that would have earlier cost him his head, and of course stood in the way of Shalltear's goal of gathering information, she now had much more self-control and responded more calmly to what she considered an unbelievable bold question from her prisoner. And the fight against the Quagoa, which Shalltear began somewhat overzealously, and from Periur's perspective wasn't necessary at all, was also quite remarkable, because on one hand it could have been averted completely if Shalltear had been given the opportunity to demonstrate her strength to several hundred or even 1,000 warriors. But on the other hand, this battle, this massacre, still proved vital for her redemption, for the redemption arc of the Blood-Red Valkyrie, because from Shalltear's point of view, this battle was all about to prove herself in the eyes of Einsolgon, as she managed to keep a clear head despite the blood rain she unleashed, and thus she could successfully complete the mission and reduce the Quagoa to a more manageable number, all without going into the blood frenzy state, all without making major misjudgments, aside the one that led to the death of most of the Quagoa. But on the other hand, it still served as Shalltear's way of redemption, as a way to prove herself in the eyes of Ainz, as she still managed to keep a clear head despite the blood rain she unleashed, and thus she was able to successfully complete the mission and stop precisely when enough Quagoa had been culled, and the overall number of Quagoans had been reduced so much that they were now very manageable from Einsolgon's point of view, all without going into the blood frenzy state and taking certain liberties with her mission. And all of this means that Shalltear Bloodfallen, a character written so intricately and detailed by Peruron Shino that the personality of her own creator has not influenced or changed her in the slightest bit, can still develop and grow as a character in the new world. Despite her status as an NPC, she is evolving as a personality, learning from her mistakes and adapting to new circumstances. And this is also further supported by Kokuto's behavior. Initially, he saw himself as the sword or the sword arm of the players, as someone who executed orders without questioning them. However, this blind obedience ended with Einsolgon's want to develop him further. And so he learned from his own impressions and experiences, formed his own plans, and implemented them. And this is also why Ainz was so enthusiastic when the otherwise silent and composed Kokutos spoke so much when pleading for the lives of the lizard men. And this character development bore fruit because Kokutos was crucial in planning and executing the offensive against the main forces of the Kingdom of Riestais in the 14th novel. And in the end, as one of the leaders of the offensive, he basically just executed his own plans, strategies and tactics, and made independent decisions, as seen as the fight against Brain Anglaus, where he took a brief detour in order to honor the efforts of this noble warrior. And this slight change in personality is also why he was the one who gave the Sorcerer Kingdom its name. So overall, the fact that all of these characters, be it Sebastian, Kokutos, or Shalltear Bloodfallen, are at level 100 and cannot gain new levels, so they can't get any stronger by training or some such thing, has the pleasant side effect that any further development and increase in their strength, combat power, and abilities is based on intelligence, reflection, and character development. And I stress this so much because in many other anime, Like again Naruto, character development is almost non-existent. Sure, Naruto gets stronger and stronger, learns new jutsus, new people, and new Pokémon, but he doesn't develop as a character. His approach of just saying, "Trust me, bro," when confronted with complicated real politics problems, such as the Third Ninja World War and what it did to the Land of the Rain, is never questioned, and he is never confronted with the failure of his approaches and the consequences that psychopaths like Orochimaru, who were responsible for the death of thousands of people, often under unworthy conditions and after long suffering, are allowed to roam freely in the same village where his children go to school. In contrast to this, Shalltear, her arrogant, imperious, snobbish, and dominant mannerism brought her low after riding high on her vampire bride's hands. Pun intended. And her recklessness and overconfidence, ignoring Sebas's warning that she could enter the blood frenzy state and gradually lose control and make mistakes, came back to haunt her bitterly. Had she listened to Sebas, who meant well with her, she probably would never have entered the blood frenzy state at all, like later in the battle against the Quagoan army, where she must have executed tens of thousands of members, draining all the blood away with her lance, before it could seriously unsettle the Valkyrie. So Shalltear does learn to take the advice of others, to act reflectively, which is ironic for a vampire, and to analyze things rather than blindly rely on her power and her status as the strongest floor guardian, and thinking that the world is full of weaklings who could never ever harm her. She went through grief, felt great anger towards herself, and became better as a person. In other words, the caution and the character traits that Ain Sul Gun exhibits have indeed dropped off on Shalltear Bloodfallen a little bit. But at the same time, I also want to say that her character hasn't changed completely or unrealistically. Shalltear is still Shalltear, but just now more self-reflective, which again is kind of ironic for a vampire, if you know what I mean. And with all of this said, the video's over, and now it's your turn. Let me know your opinions on Shalltear, her character change, and the fact that Ain Sul Gun has probably more influenced her than her own creator did, with the personality rubbing off of her. And while you type, I say thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for supporting the channel if you're a Patreon member, and special thanks to Ada Daddy Ada, ASK, Bad Guy Ye, Bad Burrito 316, Bezer, Ben C, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Dan Pep, Dragonlord Placido Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Thiralchivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Lelouch V. Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Lofrazer, Merovec, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, Oh Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pantum, Personage, Ruru, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Cune Caracos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Sir Axolotl, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rock Ed Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito 27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Zinukai, and Sonegon Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.